Good morning, everyone. And thank you for being here this morning to hear Don Thomas. You know, Don and I have had amazing ventures together. Don took me to Malawi my second year at All Saints, and it was quite an experience. And wherein I didn't know much about him prior to that, I learned a lot about him after that. And one of the things I do know is that he has such a sense of rhythm and poetry and prose. And for him to share it with you this morning, I think is going to be a great experience. So I'm going to get away from this mic and allow Don to come forward.
So great to see my friends here, so many of you. Thank you. I'm going to have us open this morning by doing a group reading. And as you do the reading, you can kind of slow down a little bit and think about the words. And each word, as it comes, roll it around in your mouth and let your eyes roam around on it and listen to the sound of it. And let it penetrate deeply into your, into that core place. The very first one, the E. Cummings. It's on the first sentence. Just read aloud with me. I thank you, God, for this amazing day, for the leaping, greenly spirit of trees, and a blue, true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the Son's birthday. This is the birthday of life and love and wings and of the gay, great, happy, illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any lifted from the no of all nothing, human merely being, doubt, unimaginable you. Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened. There's something about that poem. Tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing. Now poetry, you say the word poetry, often people are just kind of turned off. It's really funny how that is. Recently, I was asked at my family reunion to do a little meditation on Sunday morning. We had the Lord's Supper there, and my older brother, the tall, handsome one with the blue eyes that used to get the blue shirts. When I was little, I got the brown ones for my brown eyes. He was in charge, but he asked me to do this, so I pulled poetry out. And most of my relatives are very conservative, and I think they expected me to be reading scriptures and commenting. I didn't. I read poetry. But I did talk about the way that poems were, and songs and minstrels and gathering old memories of parents were put together around the campfires for the Hebrews, the early Jews wandering. And they remembered things, and they would learn them, and they would sing them, and they would chant them together, kind of like we did here. Billy Collins. Well, I'm going to step back for a minute. There's a statement by one particular fellow. He was a family doctor. I started to say like me, but there was no one like him. His name was William Carlos Williams, and he wrote about visiting homes and doing things that were painful to children as he tried to save their lives. But he wrote poetry, and one of the things he said, and I can't remember the statement, but he said that poems, it's hard to know what poetry is, but every day men die for lack of what is found in them. Men die from what of lack is found in poetry. Well, what is found in poetry? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. But here's what Billy Collins says as he's talking about teaching kids or college students poetry. And when I did this at the family reunion, I wanted to try to make the poetry alive. So I had my grandkids and my nieces and nephews. Every time they got to a word in the poem, they got up and they were acting it out. So I told them in practicing, like take a beautiful piece of glass and hold it up to the light and see the shimmering of light. Or I told them to take you would take a shell and listen for the ocean. Take a beehive and listen for the zzz of the bees. Or imagine holding a mouse by its tail, dropping it into a poem, and it finds its maze, finds its way out. Or I wanted them to act like they were water skiing across a lake and yelling out the name, Shakespeare, Milton, something like that. Well, here's a poem. I asked them to take a poem and hold it up to the light like a color slide, or press an ear against its hive. I say, drop a mouse into a poem and watch him probe his way out, or walk inside the poem's room and feel the walls for a light switch. I want them to water ski across the surface of a poem, waving at the author's name on the shore. But all they want to do is tie the poem to a chair with rope and torture a confession out of it. They begin beating it with a hose to find out what it really means. One of the lines I like of Billy Collins has to do with poetry. He said, high school is the place where poems go to die. You remember the way you were taught poetry sometimes in high school? Ew. We're going to do a lot of talking about remembering. There is something about poems that if you stop and listen, the spirit of the author, he may have been gone for 4 centuries. His spirit will get into dialogue with you and you'll suddenly be astonished. You'll be amazed. You'll find something that he's saying that touches a part of you that you know, but no one's put it in words so in such an exciting way before. So poetry has a lot to do with memory and arising emotions. Some of these pictures up here that I put up are like visual poems for me, because the first time I saw them, there's something went off inside me, a deep sigh that didn't have words with it, and I didn't know why. And as I lived with them, I understood a little more, but even now, I get that deep, deep sigh of astonishment and wonder. Here's another Billy Collins poem about memory. He's talking about no time for thinking about things. But in a rush, this weekday morning, I tapped the horn as I speed past the cemetery, where my parents are buried, side by side, beneath a slab of smooth granite. Then, all day I think of him rising up to give me that look of knowing disapproval, while my mother calmly tells him to lie back down. Remembering. Here's a poem on remembering by one of my favorite poets, Mary Oliver. Years ago, in the bottle green light of the cold January sea, 2 seals suddenly appeared together in a single uplifting wave, each in exactly the same position, each like a large black comma upright and staring. I remember my grandkids trying to act like commas, wide-eyed and staring. It was like a painting done twice, and twice tenderly. The wave hung. Then it broke apart. Its lip was lightning. Its floor was the blow of sand, over which the seals rose and whirled and were gone. Of all the reasons for gladness, what could be foremost of this one? That the mind can seize both the instant and the memory. Now the seals are no more than the salt of the sea. If they live, they're more distant than Greenland. But here is the kingdom we call Remembrance, with its 1,000 doors open, with its 1,000 iron doors through which I pass so easily, switching on the old lights as I go, while the dead wind rises and the old rapture rewinds. The stiff waters once more begin to kick and flow. Memory, isn't it amazing? I can remember the first time, just like it's now, that I met some of you in this room. I mean, it's just as vivid now as that moment. Some memories are sad, some are beautiful. Memories of this room. This room brings back so many memories for me. Great people speaking. One of my memories is from, I think it was the spring of 2001. My marriage had dissolved. My arms were slowly disappearing. They've not totally disappeared yet, but they were slowly disappearing, and I was told that I might have Lou Gehrig's syndrome, ALS. Thank God. It turned out to be a variation that does not act quite the same way, and so my arms are still moving. I can still bring a fork to my mouth. I can still hold a baby in my arms. I can still pick up a poetry book. There's so many things I can still do. I heard Bill Rankin, a friend of mine who'd been a former priest formerly here, talking about a program some of him and his Jewish and Muslim friends were starting in San Francisco to work against AIDS and the HIV babies that were being born. There was a new pill, a study that shown that a pill that cost at that time $2, it now costs about 30 cents, if given to the mother as she was giving birth, or in the few hours before birth, an HIV mother, and a few drops were given to the baby afterward, could prevent HIV transmission in half the cases. Now, I was an emergency doctor where you could come and see me for a cold at the Huntington Hospital and might get a bill for $200, I don't know. It was, or if you thought you might have a heart attack, it could have been $8,000, who knows. $2 had a 50% chance of saving a life. That message of justice and spreading of Jesus' love through the world caught hold of me, because I didn't know what I was going to do with the last few years of my life, and it changed my life. This is a room where I have memories of messages of love and peace and social justice. There was one particular poem that I subsequently, and I was going to give this to you, but unfortunately it did not get printed by the printer. This is a poem by a Nobel Prize winning writer, Seamus Heaney, called Double Take. It's a selection from one of his larger poems. this became kind of my mantra because I thought that we were at a time in the world where it was possible we could feed every person in the world, where there were still 1 billion people starving, if we just had, we had the technology, we had the knowledge, we had the science, we had the transportation, if we just had the motivation. It was a magical time in history when we could do these things. Here's a poem. Human beings suffer. They torture one another. They get hurt and get hard. No poem or play or song can fully right a wrong inflicted and endured. The innocent in jails beat on their bars together. A hunger striker's father stands in the graveyard, dumb. The police widow in veils faints at the funeral home. History says, don't hope on this side of the grave. But then, once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice can rise up. So hope for a great sea change on the far side of revenge. Believe that a further shore is reachable from here. Believe in miracles and cures and healing wells. Call the miracle self-healing, the utter self-revealing double take of feeling. If there's fire on the mountain or lightning in the sky, or lightning and storm, and a God speaks from the sky, that means someone is hearing the outcry and the birth cry of new life at its term. Years ago, I came to All Saints one Sunday morning and got hooked because I heard a kind of message of love and social change that was not being spoken so loudly in other churches I've been part of. And George Regis's words and the actions of the people here caught me, and I've been caught here ever since because of that social action, that love, that acceptance, that wherever you are on your journey, message. There's someone here, a friend of mine, Susan Heck, who told me that her daughter's first social justice move was to slow down the rapid traffic on their road because it sit around the corner from a school where the high school kids would speed along. So as a 12 or 13-year-old, she started a movement and got speed bumps put on their street. I don't know, it's part of social justice and action for life-saving right out of a child's lips at All Saints. I have another friend, her mother, Julie Blackshaw, went to Malawi with me in a group. And she had a different response to the speed bumps on her street because there are things about the speed bumps when they put them in that irritated her. And she had anger and sense of injustice about it. So being a well-educated young high school student who's now a senior at Stanford, she wrote this, the speed bump sonnet. "O speed bumps, thou dost make my cold blood boil, and fill'st my throat with bitter angry bile. Thou truly art most cursed plots of soil, construction workers toiling ere did pile. For Madison, a lane once glassy smooth, down which cars, gliding peacefully did go, is now disturbed, tempest-tossed, uncouth, vaulting small vessels helpless to and fro. Thou risest darkest demons out of hell, in devilish fury prey on aching heads. Diseased blight on streets I love so well, though thou art black, thou makest me see red. And yet perhaps less virulent my hate would be if not so often I was late. That is the way creativity can be changed, how rage, vengefulness can be changed into something of beauty. Poets do that often. On to memory. My mind is just careening with memories these days, like a billiard ball bouncing around on a table, because my beautiful Mary died a few weeks ago. And so I'm reliving the beauty of times with her. I'm daily feeling the sense of loss. And this whole exercise this morning has ended up being far more self-focused than I might have done otherwise if I'd not been in the middle of all this. But some of my memories I'm going to share. The day after Mary died, my daughter, Jillian, who is a poet, a writer, dancer, mother, teacher, wrote this about Mary. The memories it aroused for me and her were touching. Morning poem, July 11th, 2012. I woke today thinking of Mary, the way she said my name with a slow Texas drawl. She spoke like a long-lost auntie. She spoke like a shaded porch on a sweltering day, lemonade in a glass pitcher, a rocking chair that moves slowly back and forth. I woke with questions from my dad. When did they meet? I knew they were young. Did they stay in touch all those years? Or were there lapses of silence? Then that moment of reconnect, that moment of remembered connection. I woke thinking of Mary, her perfect hair and little barrettes, and good taste in lipstick shades. How she loved to play make-believe games with Eliana. How Eliana then named her little plastic doll, Mary. I see Mary in a little chair, her long legs tucked primly beneath her. She sips make-believe tea from a tiny porcelain cup. I see Mary holding hands with dark-skinned children, walking boldly through dusty streets, far, far away. She sees this new world for the first time, so late in life. I commend her. It takes guts to leave all you know for love. After 6 decades on earth, after children, grandchildren. I was so touched by the quilt made by her lady friends in Texas, a parting gift when she moved away. It lay perfectly on their bed in California. Mary did things perfectly. Only an incredible woman could receive such a gift. Each square of fabric, another piece of her past. Another carefully crafted memory. Something to hold on to. The loss of Mary followed a gift of life. My newest grandchild was born to my daughter, Hillary. Some of you know Hillary from her not-for-profit, where she raises money for things through her dance group, Lineage Dance. Hillary and Rob Galbraith gave birth to this wonderful little Mazzy-Rel Thomas Galbraith. And it reminds me of a poem by Sharon Olds about the first hour. Now, Sharon is thinking about herself during the first hour, but I certainly applied it to Mazzy and to every newborn. That hour I was most myself. I had shrugged my mother off slowly off. I lay there taking my first breaths as if the air of the room was blowing me like a bubble. All I had to do was go out along the line of my gaze and back, out and back, on gravity's silk. The pressure of the air, a caress, smelling on myself her creamy blood. The air was softly touching my skin and tongue, entering me and drawing forth the little sighs I did not know as mine. I was not afraid. I lay in the quiet and looked and did the wordless thought. My mind was getting its oxygen direct, the rich mix by mouth. I hated no one. I gazed, and everything was interesting. I was free, not yet in love. I did not belong to anyone. I had drunk no milk yet. No one had my heart. I was not very human. I did not know there was anyone else. I lay like a god for an hour. Then they came for me and took me to my mother. For the first time as I read this, just now, I thought I saw the phrase. I'd seen it before, but I was not very human. I did not know there was anyone else. I've heard Archbishop Desmond Tutu say from here and from the pulpit that a human being is not a human being unless he or she is in full connection with all the people around. I was not very human. I did not know there was anyone else. Some of us live in a not very human way. Some of us live in a not very human way because we've lost poetry in our lives. I don't care if you read poetry, but if you've lost poetry, that sense of the air entering in and touching that God center that makes you feel alive. You know, the unexamined life is said to be a life not worth living. I say that the life without poetry is a shriveled up life. So unless you're seeing life if you're seeing life without amazement and awe and wonder and gratitude, well, you're shriveled up. You need to open up your eyes, your ears, you're touching. Here's Mary Oliver on the summer day. All my memories of the family reunion kept going back to my parents and the values they gave me, and my brothers and sisters, and what we hoped we were passing on. Who made the world? Referencing back to that thing we read earlier, the unimaginable you. I'm not an atheist because I believe in something I cannot imagine, something beyond imaginable. I'm an atheist for most of the gods I hear about. The God that is punishing, that is burning people forever, that is taking a sword and wiping out his enemies. But this unimaginable, deep place within me and beyond the stars that gives me this wonder and awe, that's my source of thinking I'm not an atheist. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Can you imagine my grandchildren being like swans or black bears? Or the grasshopper? Who made the grasshopper? I mean the one who has flung herself out on the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down in the grass, how to kneel in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Ed Bacon's going to have a book out in a few weeks about what life's about, and love's at the core. The next poem I'm reading is from Naomi Shihab. She's a Palestinian woman. Well, she's half Palestinian. Her father's Palestinian. Her mother was from St. Louis or somewhere. But she grew up experiencing what it was like to have Palestinian and terrorist always used in the same breath. Kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things, feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath to keep him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is you I have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. Hafiz, the Persian poet, writes about the way you can get. I know the way you can get when you've not had a drink of love. Your face hardens. Your sweet muscles cramp. Children become concerned about a strange look that appears in your eyes, which even begins to worry your own mirror and nose. Squirrels and birds sense your sadness and call an important conference in a tall tree. They decide which secret code to chant to help your mind and soul. Even angels fear that brand of madness that raises itself against the world and throws sharp stones and spears into the innocent and into oneself. Oh, I know the way you can get if you've not been drinking love. You might rip apart every sentence your friends and teachers say, looking for hidden clauses. You might weigh every word on a scale like a dead fish. You might pull out a ruler to measure every angle in your darkness, the beautiful dimensions of a heart you once trusted. I know the way you can get if you've not had a drink, have not had a drink from love's hands. That's why the great ones speak of the vital need to keep remembering God. So you will come to know and see him as being so playful and wanting to help. Bring your cup near to me, for all I care about is quenching your thirst for freedom. All a sane man can ever care about is giving love. getting close to the end of time. I'm going to get quite personal, but first I want to give you a few other little lines from Mary Oliver. This is not a full poem, but she says in one of her poems, listen, are you breathing just a little and calling it a life? She has another where she talks about instructions for living. These three. Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it. In another, she says, when it's over, I want to say all my life was a bride married to her amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. I told you about the fright I got when my arms were going and I thought I had a fairly limited time left on earth. Then I reconnected with my wonderful Mary and had the most amazing 8.5 years with her before something in her head started changing because of dopamine insufficiency, and her memory started going, and her body started moving away. But I remembered this poem that I had often given to friends who were struggling with addiction. This is by Raymond Carver. It's very short, tells its own story. No other word will do, for that's what it was. Gravy. Gravy these past 10 years. Alive, sober, working, loving and being loved by a good woman. 11 years ago, he was told he had 6 months to live at the rate he was going. And he was going nowhere but down. So he changed his ways somehow. He quit drinking. And the rest? After that, it was all gravy. Every minute of it. Up to and including when he was told about, well, some things were breaking down and building up inside his head. Don't weep for me, he said to his friends. I'm a lucky man. I've had 10 years longer than I or anyone expected. Pure gravy. And don't forget it. There's an excerpt from a poem by Gerald Stern about his day on the beach on the New Jersey shore. But he is exuberant with joy about his life. And he calls it lucky life. I call it gravy life. I call it grace in life. I call it, I'm so thankful that I've given a chance to take that breath in and to be able to see things and hear things and touch things. So this is an excerpt called Lucky Life. Lucky life isn't one long string of horrors. And there are moments of peace and pleasure as I lie in between the blows. Lucky life is like this. Lucky there is an ocean to come to. Lucky you can judge yourself in the water. Lucky you can be purified over and over again. Lucky there's the same cleanliness for everyone. Lucky life is like that. Lucky life. Oh, lucky life. Oh, lucky, lucky life. Lucky life. I'm going to close with this last poem by Stanley Kunitz. He died about the age of 96, I think, about 6 or 8 years ago. When he was about 90, I think he wrote this. He was quite old anyway. The Layers. I've walked through many lives, some of them my own, and I am not who I was, though some principle of being abides, from which I struggle not to stray. When I look behind, I'm compelled to look before I can gather strength to proceed on my journey. I see the milestones dwindling toward the horizon and the slow fires trailing from the abandoned campsites over which scavenger angels wheel on heavy wings. Oh, I have made myself a tribe out of my true affections, and my tribe is scattered. How shall the heart be reconciled to its feast of losses? In a rising wind, the manic dust of my friends, those who fell along the way, bitterly stings my face. Yet I turn, exulting somewhat with my will intact to go wherever I need to go, and every stone on the road precious to me. In my darkest night, when the moon was covered, and I roamed through wreckage, a nimbus-clouded voice directed me. Live in the layers, not on the litter. Though I lack the art to decipher it, no doubt the next chapter of my book of transformations is already written. I am not done with my changes. I'm grateful for life, my life of gratitude. Oh, lucky, lucky life. Lucky life. Thank you.